The last thing Hester Wynn heard before the freight wagon rolled away was her stepmother laughing. Not loudly. Lavinia never needed volume when cruelty would carry on its own. She stood beneath the striped awning of Wynn Mercantile, one gloved hand resting on the shoulder of her daughter Pearl, and said to a customer, "A man alone that high in the mountains cannot afford to be particular. He asked for a woman who could work. Hester has always been good for that." The customer looked toward the wagon and quickly hid her pity. Otis Cole shifted on the driver's bench. "You settled back there, Miss Wynn?" Hester tightened both hands around the handle of her carpetbag. "I am." Her father stood inside the mercantile doorway. Ezra raised his fingers once, but did not come into the road, silence Lavinia, or ask Hester to stay. The wagon lurched forward. Faircross moved past her, the hitching rail she had repaired, the feed bins she had built, the alley where she had unloaded flour until her palms split. Nothing looked changed by her leaving. For 14 years she had been useful enough to hold the place together and unimportant enough for anyone to notice the weight. At the end of Main Street, the road bent west. Hester did not turn around. At 27, Hester was broad-shouldered, heavy in the hips, and stronger than most men who came asking for credit. Lavinia made each fact sound like a charge. Then a letter came from Montana Territory. Jonah Blackwell, owner of a horse ranch above Greyhaven, sought a wife accustomed to hard winters and practical work. He offered 6 weeks of courtship, separate rooms, and return fare if either party refused the match. Lavinia had smiled, as if clearing damaged goods from a storeroom. Hester still said yes. She did not expect Jonah Blackwell to want her. She only knew that staying meant waking each morning inside a life already hardened around her. For 4 days, the freight wagon followed the open country northwest. On the second evening, Otis pointed toward a thin blue line beneath the clouds. "You ever seen mountains? Not close. They'll cure you of thinking the world was made for convenience." By the 4th day, the line had become the snow-folded wall of the Sable Range, the air sharpened with pine and the iron smell of freezing water. Greyhaven appeared near noon, gathered along a muddy street beside a river. It was smaller than Faircross and rougher at the edges. Horses stamped at the rails, while a hammer struck metal somewhere beyond the false front buildings. Otis pulled up before the freight office. Hester climbed down carefully. After 4 days on the wagon, her knees felt borrowed. Mud caught at the hem of her brown dress. Wind lifted loose strands of hair from beneath her bonnet and blew them across her mouth. People looked, some with the blunt curiosity used on livestock. Hester reached for her carpetbag before Otis could offer help. A brass bell sounded from inside the freight office as the door opened. The man who stepped into the street wore a dark wool coat and a weathered black hat. He was tall without seeming to use his height as a warning. Wind had reddened the high planes of his face. A pale scar cut through one eyebrow, and there was gray at his temples despite the strength in the rest of him. He looked first at Otis, then at the wagon, then at Hester. She knew the sequence she had dreaded: surprise, calculation, disappointment, rearranged into politeness. Jonah Blackwell's gaze settled on her face. His expression changed, but not in the way she expected. Concern drew a line between his brows. "Miss Wynn?" "Yes." He crossed the street, stopping far enough away that she did not have to step back. "Jonah Blackwell," I assumed. A flicker of amusement touched his eyes and disappeared. He looked down at the mud on her skirt and the stiffness in her stance. "Did the axle break?" Otis spat into the road. "Twice near Red Bluff. Lost half a day." Jonah's attention returned to Hester. "Are you hurt?" The question was so ordinary that she almost misunderstood it. "No." "Cold?" "I have been colder." That was not what I asked. Hester studied him. There was no mockery in his face. He had asked because he wanted the answer. "A little," she admitted. Jonah took off his gloves. "There is coffee inside. Nell Avery keeps it strong enough to remove paint." The freight office was warm with stove heat. A dark-haired woman came from behind the mail counter with coffee already in hand. "Nell Avery. Postmistress when the government remembers to pay me. Freight clerk when it does not." Hester Wynn. Drink before Blackwell takes you up the ridge. He thinks cold is a personal failing. I do not, Jonah said. You live at 6,000 feet by choice. No one waited for Hester to laugh, but the tightness between her shoulders eased. Jonah carried her trunk from the wagon while she drank. He did not make a performance of the weight, though it took both hands. When he returned, he set a small leather purse on the counter. Hester looked at it. What is that? Your return fare. Nell stopped sorting letters. Jonah rested one hand beside the purse, not on it. The notice said 6 weeks. I meant it. You will have your own room at Cinder Ridge. At the end of 6 weeks, we decide whether we wish to marry. Either one of us may decide against it sooner. My family told me the fare would be provided if the arrangement failed. They did not provide it. Heat climbed Hester's face. I see. I thought you should have it before we leave town. You expect me to run? No, Jonah's voice remained even. I expect you to know you can. For a moment, the room seemed too quiet. Even the stove had gone still. Hester touched the edge of the purse. The coins shifted beneath her fingers. It was enough to return to Faircross, perhaps enough to go elsewhere. No one had ever handed her a choice before asking what she would do with it. She closed her hand around the purse. Thank you. Jonah inclined his head, as if accepting thanks for something small. Outside, a strip of blue rawhide had been braided around the off-horse's cheekpiece. That lace is splitting, Hester said. It was replaced last month. The center is dry-rotted. It may fail on the climb. Jonah bent it once. The rawhide cracked. There is a harness maker nearby, he said. I have a spare strap in my trunk. You carry harness leather with your dresses? I packed what I might need. His face softened. Then I am in your debt. No, you are in need of a strap. After a moment, he nodded. That is better. They left Greyhaven beneath a tin-colored sky. The road crossed the river and climbed through lodgepole pine. Jonah did not fill the silence merely to avoid it. When he spoke, he named landmarks. Hester listened and watched the horses. The repaired cheekpiece held. 2 hours above town, the trees opened. Cinder Ridge lay in a high basin beneath the mountains. A long timber house, 2 barns, corrals built against the slope, and a meadow already silvered with frost. Horses moved along the far fence. Smoke bent east from the chimney. It was not a grand place. It was solid. Everything stood where weather had tested it and failed to carry it away. A gray-bearded man and a lanky boy came from the barn. Amos Red, Jonah said, and Toby Lane. Amos removed his hat. Toby tried so hard not to stare that he nearly struck the gate. Which horse bites? Hester asked. The sorrel mare. Then I'll keep my hand elsewhere. Toby smiled despite himself. Jonah carried her trunk inside. The house opened into a large kitchen with a black stove, a scarred table, and shelves built too high for convenience. The room was clean but spare. 3 hooks held coats by the door. Only 2 chairs stood at the table. A red wool blanket had been folded over the back of one. Hester stopped. The color was deep and warm, nearly the same shade as the blanket her mother had kept at the foot of her bed during Hester's childhood. For an instant, she saw Margaret Wynn's hands smoothing the wool. Jonah noticed where she was looking. That belonged to my mother. You may use it if the nights turn colder. Hester set her carpetbag down. I would not want to damage it. Blankets are made to be used. The words entered quietly and found a place in her she had not guarded. He showed her the rest of the house, a parlor with 1 bookcase, his room at the west end, a small spare room facing south, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the basin. This is yours, he said. There is a bolt on the inside. Hester looked at the door. Jonah stepped back into the hall, giving her space before she had to request it. Supper is usually at 6. If you are tired, you may sleep. No one expects work from you today. I can cook. I believe you. I meant I could prepare supper. So did I. His tone was not sharp. But you have traveled 4 days. Amos made stew. Hester did not know what to do with a kindness that refused payment. I am accustomed to earning my keep. Jonah's face altered slightly, the humor gone. You are a guest while we decide what we may become. You do not owe me labor for the room. And if we decide against marriage, then you leave owing me nothing. She almost asked what he would take from her instead. Time, gratitude, the effort of pretending not to be disappointed. But he had already turned toward the kitchen. At supper, Amos spoke about an injured gelding. Toby described a wolf track so large that Amos accused him of measuring it with his imagination. Jonah asked Hester whether the climb had troubled her breathing and whether the room needed another lamp. No one asked her to serve. When she rose to carry the stew pot, Amos took it first without comment. The conversation moved around her rather than pinning her in place. A brass bell beside the back door stirred in the draft. Jonah explained that wire connected it to the foaling barn, so a mare in distress would ring it. Does it wake the whole house? Hester asked. It should. That depends on the bell. Jonah glanced at her. You distrust it? I distrust any warning system that has not been tested. Toby hid a grin in his cup. After supper, Hester expected the men to leave the dishes. Instead, Amos stacked bowls, Toby carried water, and Jonah rolled up his sleeves at the wash basin. She stood beside the table with nothing in her hands. The absence of a command felt more unsettling than work. Jonah looked over. Is something wrong? No. He waited. Hester disliked that he appeared willing to go on waiting. At home, she said at last. Supper was my responsibility. This is not your home. The words struck harder than he intended. She saw his realization immediately. Not yet, he corrected. I meant that the rules from Faircross do not govern you here. Hester looked down at the scarred tabletop. Thank you, she said. He dried his hands on a cloth. You do not have to thank me every time no one mistreats you. She raised her eyes. Jonah's expression held no pity, only a kind of anger aimed somewhere far behind her. That may take practice, she said. I have no objection to practice. Later, alone in the south room, Hester opened her trunk. Beneath 2 dresses lay the tools she had packed. Awl, waxed thread, harness knife, whetstone, and 3 lengths of leather. Lavinia had laughed when she saw them. Hester placed the purse of return money in the washstand drawer. Then she carried the red blanket from the kitchen and spread it across the bed. The wool smelled faintly of cedar smoke. Outside, the basin had gone black beneath the mountains. Cinder Ridge creaked and settled around her. Somewhere in the barn, a horse stamped. The brass bell remained silent. Hester slid the bolt across the door. For years, a locked door had meant someone wished to keep her out. Tonight, for the first time, the lock was hers to use. She lay beneath the red blanket and listened to the wind moving over a house where no one had yet asked her to earn the right to sleep. She did not trust the peace. But before sleep took her, she allowed herself to believe it might still be there in the morning. The brass bell rang before dawn. Hester woke with the sound already inside her bones. She threw back the red blanket, pulled on her boots, and reached the kitchen as Jonah came from the west hall fastening his suspenders. The bell jerked again above the back door. 2 hard notes, then a broken third. Foaling barn, he said. They crossed the yard beneath a moon thin as scraped silver. Frost snapped under their boots. Amos was already in the barn with a lantern raised, while Toby struggled to keep a bay mare from crowding the wall. She's been down twice, Amos said. No progress. The mare's flanks shuddered. Sweat darkened her neck despite the cold. Jonah stepped toward her. Hester caught his sleeve. Wait. He stopped. She entered the stall slowly, speaking low until the mare's ears tipped toward her. Hester ran a hand along the trembling shoulder, then knelt behind her. One foreleg, she said. The other is folded back. Amos swore under his breath. Jonah crouched opposite Hester. Can you turn it? If she gives me room. Another contraction tightened the mare's body. Hester pressed one shoulder against the wall and reached farther. The angle was wrong. If they pulled now, they would injure both mare and foal. Hold her head up, Hester said. Do not let her roll. Jonah obeyed. Toby hovered at the gate, pale with fear. "Clean harness line," Hester told him. "Then boil water." He ran. Hester waded through the next contraction and worked the trapped leg backward before easing it forward. Her arm cramped. The mare kicked once, close enough for the hoof to brush Hester's boot. Jonah's face tightened. "Hester, do not pull me away." He went still. The second hoof shifted beneath her hand. Now. Amos took one leg. Jonah took the other. At Hester's signal they pulled with the mare's effort, not against it. The foal slid into the straw in a wet, motionless heap. For one terrible second, no one breathed. Hester cleared its muzzle and rubbed hard along its ribs. "Come on," she whispered. "You cross too much ground to stop here." The foal coughed. Toby laughed from the doorway. Amos sat back on his heels. Jonah lowered his head once. The mare turned to lick her young. Hester rose on shaking legs. Jonah looked at her as though he had forgotten the rest of the barn. "You have done that before. 23 times. My father traded draft horses before Lavinia persuaded him cloth was cleaner." Jonah glanced toward the mare. He chose poorly. Lavinia preferred obedience to good judgment. The bitterness in her own voice surprised her. She turned to the wire leading from the stall to the bell. "The knot is loose," she said. Jonah came beside her. Each time the mare had struck the rail, the latch had tugged the wire enough to sound the warning. "A lucky fault," he said. "A fault is only lucky once." By sunrise, Hester had retied the wire and made Toby test it from every stall. The bell rang cleanly each time. At breakfast, Amos set an extra biscuit on her plate. He did not say why. Hester ate it anyway. Over the next 10 days, Cinder Ridge revealed itself through small failures. A hinge on the north grain shed had sagged enough to admit snow. 2 saddle blankets had been folded damp. The injured gelding favored his left hind leg not because of the cut Amos had treated, but because a nail had worked crooked in the opposite shoe. Hester pointed out each problem once. No one accused her of imagining it. No one asked why she had been looking. Jonah listened, checked, and acted. That should have made trust easy. Instead, it unsettled her. She kept waiting for the day he would gather all her usefulness into a debt she could never repay. On the 11th morning, she entered the feed room and smelled rot beneath the oats. She cut the twine from one sack and pushed her hand deep into the grain. The center was warm. When Amos arrived, she showed him the pale clumps breaking into powder between her fingers. They opened 6 sacks. 4 were spoiled. Jonah came in as Toby dragged them into the yard. "How much is safe?" "Everything against the east wall," Hester said. "The rest must be spread and checked. That is nearly a month's feed." "Yes." His jaw hardened. Hester knew that look. Ezra had worn it whenever bad news arrived, and no one convenient had yet been blamed. "I should have checked sooner," she said. Jonah turned toward her. "You arrived 11 days ago. I noticed the shed hinge." "I could have." "This shipment came before you did." The answer was reasonable, which made it difficult to accept. He told Amos to send samples and the freight receipt to Silas Creed in Greyhaven. "You kept the receipt?" Hester asked. Jonah gave her a puzzled look. Of course. At the Wynn store, receipts disappeared whenever they proved inconvenient. "Would you examine the rest of the winter stores?" he asked. "As an employee?" "No." "As a prospective wife?" His gaze remained steady, as someone whose judgment has proven sound. "And if I find nothing, then we will have sound grain and lose an afternoon." He had not made her value depend on success. "I'll need Toby." From the yard came the boy's voice. "I can hear you bargaining over me." Amos shouted back, "Then hitch faster." By evening, Hester had found salt packed against a sweating wall and 3 jars with cracked seals. The losses were small, because she had caught them early. Afterward, she stood at the kitchen table making a list. Jonah brought 2 cups of coffee and placed one beside her. She drank, then looked at him. "There is no sugar." "You do not take sugar." "I told you once." I remember useful information. The words struck an old bruise. Jonah saw it. That was poorly said. Hester lowered her eyes to the list. I meant information that helps me care for people, he said. Not information that makes them useful. She had not expected him to hear the difference, much less correct it. Most men would pretend they meant it properly the first time. I am not most men. No, she said. You are beginning to make that inconvenient. The corner of his mouth lifted. The days found a rhythm. Hester worked because work needed doing, but she also walked beyond the corrals at dusk. She read one of Jonah's books without asking. When she shifted the kitchen table closer to the window, he considered the change and said the morning light would be better. Toby began consulting her before repairing leather. Amos left inventory tallies beside her coffee. On a ranch, trust often arrived disguised as another task. Jonah was harder to read. He spoke little about himself, yet noticed when Hester's gloves wore thin and when she went quiet after Nell brought mail from Faircross with no letter for her. He did not ask whether she was hurt. He invited her to ride to the upper pasture. Snow lay between the grasses like flour across a dark table. Jonah rode a black gelding named Bishop. Hester took a stout buckskin mare that tested her hands twice before cooperating. Near the north fence, Hester saw 2 sets of initials cut into a weathered post. JB. SB. A single axe scar crossed the second pair. Samuel? She asked. Jonah's horse slowed. My younger brother. Hester waited. He died 6 winters ago. The wind lifted powder from the firs. I'm sorry. I told him we could reach the line cabin before the storm closed. He wanted to camp below the pass. Jonah stared at the fence. I knew the country better. That was what I said. What happened? The wind shifted. We lost the trail. His horse broke a leg after dark. I found the cabin the next morning. His hand tightened on the reins. Samuel stopped feeling his hands before midnight. Hester looked at the scar in the post. You cut that. Yes. Why only once? His gaze moved to her. Because you knew the post was not to blame. For several heartbeats, only the saddle leather creaked. Jonah looked away. Amos said this house had become a place where I waited for the next winter. That is why I sent the courtship notice. You wanted a practical marriage. I thought that would be enough. And now, he met her eyes. Now I think practical can become another word for cowardly when a man uses it to avoid saying what he hopes for. Hester's pulse climbed. What do you hope for? I hope you stay long enough for us to learn whether this peace belongs to both of us. Peace frightened her because she wanted it. She turned the buckskin toward the fence line. I need you to understand something. At Faircross, Lavinia praised me whenever praise made me work harder. Indispensable on Monday, shameful on Tuesday. Both meant the same thing. Do more and ask for less. I am not Lavinia. No, but I am still the woman she trained. The admission exposed more than anger ever did. If you come to value me, it cannot be only because I save grain, or know when a mare is in trouble. I will not spend another life earning permission to remain. Jonah dismounted. Hester almost retreated when he approached, but he stopped beyond reach. You were worth the return fare before I knew you could repair a strap, he said. You were worth a locked door before you saved that foal. If you never inspect another sack of grain, you will still be entitled to speak at my table and disagree with me in my own yard. He spoke without heat, placing each word where she could examine it. I cannot prove all of that in 2 weeks, he said. I can only keep proving it 1 day at a time. Hester looked down at him. What if I disagree often? I have survived Amos for 18 years. From farther along the fence came Amos's shout. I heard that. Hester laughed before she could stop herself. The buckskin startled. Jonah caught the bridle, steadying the mare without touching Hester's leg. His hand rested below hers on the leather, close but not claiming. He had not asked her to heal what winter had taken from him. He had only allowed her to see the wound. Hester reached down and offered him her hand. He took it. The contact lasted only long enough to help him mount. but his palm was warm through the glove. They rode back to Cinder Ridge side by side. That evening, Hester moved the second chair, so neither place at the kitchen table faced the wall. Jonah noticed. He said nothing, but when he brought the coffee, he set both cups between them. The Wynn wagon appeared 3 mornings later. Hester saw it from the kitchen window, a dark shape climbing the ridge beneath a low sky. Pearl sat beside Ezra on the wagon seat, wrapped in blue. Lavinia rode behind them beneath a fur robe, upright despite the road. For a moment, the old house in Faircross rose inside Hester's chest, the narrow stairs, Lavinia's voice behind a closed door, Ezra studying ledgers while pretending not to hear. Jonah entered from the yard. You know them. Yes. You want them turned around. The question steadied her. No. Let them come. By the time the wagon stopped, Hester stood on the porch with her hands empty. Lavinia looked first at the ranch, then at Hester's wool dress and heavy boots. She seemed disappointed to find no visible misery. Hester, Ezra said. Father. Pearl climbed down without meeting her eyes. Lavinia accepted Amos's hand, as if the ranch had been expecting her. You might have written, Hester said. We did not know whether a letter would reach you. Nell brings mail every Thursday. Lavinia's mouth tightened. We should speak inside. The kitchen felt smaller with them in it. Lavinia took the chair nearest the stove without invitation. Ezra stood behind her, hat turning in his hands. Jonah remained near the door, not between Hester and her family, but beside her. Ezra cleared his throat. There has been difficulty at the store. What kind? The freight books are confused, Lavinia said. Suppliers were promised different delivery dates. Pearl's wedding arrangements are falling behind. Hester waited. Lavinia spread her hands. You have had your adventure. It is time to come home. For one instant, Hester nearly answered as she once had, with an apology disguised as a question. Then the brass bell stirred above the back door, as wind pressed against its wire. Not a warning, only metal remembering it had a voice. This is my home for now, Hester said. You have known this man less than a month. I knew you for 20 years. Ezra flinched. Lavinia's face hardened. Do not confuse indulgence with permanence. Mr. Blackwell may find your habits useful today. That does not mean... Hester, Jonah said quietly, do you want me to answer her? The room went still. Not yet. He inclined his head. Lavinia laughed once. Has he trained you to ask permission before speaking? No. That is why he asked mine. Pearl looked up. Hester rested one hand on the back of the second chair. Why did you come this far in winter? Ezra glanced at Lavinia. The old gesture gave Hester her answer. Look at me, Father. He did. The store cannot run without you, he said. No, it cannot run without the work I did for all of you. Lavinia rose. Must you make everything ugly? You taught me that word. Color climbed Lavinia's throat. You sent me away because you thought I would be grateful for any offer, Hester continued. Now you need me back, and you call need by the name of family. We gave you a roof. I kept the roof from falling in. We fed you. I ordered the flour, balanced the accounts, preserved the food, and worked the counter. You were a daughter in that house. I was labor you did not pay. Ezra closed his eyes. Pearl whispered, Mother, be quiet. Hester saw a loose thread at Pearl's cuff. Once she would have reached to fix it. She kept her hands still. Lavinia turned to Jonah. You should understand what sort of woman you are considering. Hester questions every decision. She notices faults no one asked her to notice. Gratitude has never come naturally to her. Jonah's expression did not change. In the time Hester has been here, she has saved a mare and foal, found spoiled feed before it sickened my horses, and told me when I was wrong. Exactly, Lavinia said. No. He stepped closer to Hester, leaving space between them. You call her judgment disobedience because admitting she was right would cost you something. You call her strength ugliness because you could not control it. You call her ungrateful because she stopped paying for shelter with silence. Ezra lowered his head. I do not value Hester because she is useful to me, Jonah said. I value the truth of her, including the parts that make my life harder. The words found places Hester had kept numb. Lavinia drew herself up. You are being manipulated. Jonah looked at Hester. Do you need me to continue? She swallowed. No. He stepped back half a pace. Hester turned to Ezra. Did you know how she treated me? His mouth opened. Nothing came. Did you know? Yes. The answer was nearly soundless. Pearl began to cry. Why did you never stop her? Hester asked. There was always so much conflict. For you. For me, there was no end to it. I thought you were strong enough. You used my strength as permission to abandon me. Ezra looked as though she had struck him. Lavinia told him they were leaving, but he did not move. At last he said, I was a coward. You deserved better from me. The admission did not restore a single year. Still, it remained in the room, instead of being swallowed by silence. Yes, Hester said. I did. Pearl wiped her face. What are we supposed to do now? Learn the books. Read every freight receipt. Hire help and pay them. She will hate that. Then she may do the work herself. Lavinia reached for her gloves. You will regret this when he tires of you. The old cruelty came dressed as prophecy. Once, it would have followed Hester into sleep. Now she looked at Jonah, not for rescue, but because he had shown her that answers could be chosen. If he does, she said, I still will not return to you. Lavinia had expected fear. Without it, her power looked small. Hester opened the door. Leave before the upper road freezes. Pearl paused at the threshold. I did not know how much you did. You knew enough. I am sorry. Hester looked at the loose thread on her cuff. Be different. That will matter more. Ezra stopped beside her. May I write? You may. Will you answer? When I have something honest to say. He accepted that and followed Pearl outside. Lavinia passed without looking at Hester. The wagon turned below the barns and disappeared among the pines. Only then did Hester's knees weaken. She gripped the porch rail. Jonah stood behind her without touching her. I thought I would feel larger, she said. What do you feel? Like a room after a storm breaks a window, quiet, but full of cold. Jonah held out his coat. I am not trying to wrap you in it, he said. I am offering. She let him settle it over her shoulders. I did not need you to defend me. I know. Then why did you? Because silence can become agreement. Hester understood he was speaking of more than Lavinia. You asked before you spoke. I did not know whether standing beside you would feel like support or another man taking control. The care in that distinction undid her. One sob escaped before she could stop it. Jonah waited until she lowered her hand. May I hold you? She nodded. His arms came around her carefully, strength offered without becoming a cage. Hester rested her forehead against his chest. She had imagined being chosen as a bright, victorious thing. Instead, it felt like grieving every year she had not been. Jonah held her while the cold moved down from the Sable Range and the wagon carrying her old life vanished into the trees. When she finally stepped back, his coat remained around her shoulders. Inside, the second chair stood where she had placed it. She sat down. Jonah poured coffee into both cups and took the seat across from her. For a long time, neither spoke. This time, the silence belonged to them. By Thursday, Greyhaven had heard a different version of the visit. Nell brought it with the mail and set her jaw before she spoke. Lavinia told Silas Creed that Jonah brought you here under false promises, then kept you from returning home. Silas repeated it at the council room. Hester folded the letter she had been reading. Did anyone believe him? Enough people to make trouble. Jonah stood at the kitchen window. Snow had begun to move sideways across the yard. Nell continued. Silas refused credit on the replacement feed. He also claims the town should reconsider the winter horse contract until the council is satisfied Cinder Ridge is properly managed. Properly managed by whom? Hester asked. By a man who sells wet oats and calls rot a misunderstanding. Jonah turned. I will ride down. Hester rose. We will. No. The word came too fast. Jonah saw her face and added, The upper road will be gone by afternoon. You were willing to take it. I know the turns. So do I. The weather is worsening. That is not the whole reason. His gaze shifted toward the white beyond the glass. Hester saw Samuel's storm enter the room between them. You are staying here, Jonah said. Silence followed. Amos looked down at his coffee. Nell became very interested in tying the mail sack. Hester stepped closer to Jonah. You do not get to decide that. I will not take you into a whiteout to answer gossip. You may choose not to take me. You may not choose whether I go. His mouth hardened. This is my ranch. And this is my life. He flinched as if the words had found bone. Hester lowered her voice. You asked before speaking to my family because you understood the difference between standing beside me and standing over me. Do not lose that difference because you are afraid. I buried my brother because I believed I could outride a storm. And now you believe fear makes every decision righteous. The brass bell stirred in the draft, a faint metal tremor. Jonah looked toward it. When he faced her again, anger had gone out of him, leaving exhaustion. You are right, he said. No defense followed. He removed his coat from the peg and laid it on the table. I am afraid. I turned that fear into an order, because orders feel safer than trust. Hester's breathing eased, though the hurt remained. What do we do now? He asked. We decide together. Nell untied the mail sack. For what it is worth, the school wagon is due from the North Settlement before dark. Once it arrives, I can ride back with Otis at first light and call a council meeting. No one will settle anything tonight. Jonah studied the storm. Then no one leaves the ridge. Hester nodded. This time, the decision belonged to both of them. By late afternoon, the world beyond the windows had vanished. Snow packed against the kitchen door. Amos moved the horses into the lower barn. Toby checked the bell wire twice. Jonah and Hester worked without speaking much, but the silence no longer felt like punishment. Near dusk, hoofbeats struck the yard. Toby opened the door to a man bent low over a lathered horse. Nell reached him first. The rider nearly fell from the saddle. School wagon never reached Greyhaven, he gasped. 6 children aboard. Driver too. Miss Pearl Wynn went with them from the North Settlement. Hester felt the room narrow. Jonah reached for his coat. Which road? He asked. The main road, Silas said. But there is no track past Miller's Bridge. Hester looked at the blue rawhide strap hanging from a peg beside the door, the piece she had replaced on Jonah's harness. Pearl's wedding wagon used the same dyed rawhide from Wynn Mercantile. If they took the main road, Hester said, the bridge would show wheel cuts. Jonah met her eyes. Where else? The old freight cut. Amos swore. The abandoned route crossed above a ravine where drifts gathered deep enough to bury a team. Jonah's face went pale, but he did not order Hester to stay. What do you need? He asked. Hester took the blue strap from the peg and reached for her gloves. Rope, lanterns, the buckskin mare. Outside, the storm pressed against Cinder Ridge like a living thing. This time, they would enter it together. The old freight cut vanished beneath the snow, less than a mile from Cinder Ridge. Hester rode first, leaning low over the buckskin's neck, while Jonah and Amos followed the faint rise of the abandoned road. Wind erased their tracks almost as soon as they made them. At the first bend, Hester dismounted. Half buried beside a drift lay a strip of blue rawhide, torn fresh along one edge. The wagon came this way. They found a wheel mark beyond the pines, then a broken branch. The ravine announced itself by sound, a horse screaming somewhere below. Jonah stopped so suddenly Bishop slid sideways. Hester saw the past seize him, the dark, the cold, Samuel losing feeling in his hands. Jonah, look at me. Tell me what you can see. His breath shook once. A cedar split by lightning, the ravine edge beyond it. Good. Take Amos and anchor the rope there. The command gave him ground beneath his feet. He nodded. The school wagon had broken through a snow shelf and lodged against 2 pines 20 feet below. One horse was dead. The other thrashed in the traces. Pearl crouched inside with the children around her. The driver lay pinned beneath the front bench. "Hester!" Pearl cried. "We see you." Hester tested the rope around her waist. Jonah gripped it. "The shelf may break." "I know. I should go. You outweigh me. The wagon will not hold you." His jaw worked. "Trust me." He closed his eyes for 1 heartbeat, then tied the knot himself. "I do." Hester descended backward through blowing snow. The wagon groaned when she reached it. She cut the surviving horse free, then looped the rope around the smallest child. Above, Jonah and Amos hauled. One by one, the children rose through the white. A boy without a hat, twin girls clinging together, 3 more, too frightened to cry. The shelf cracked beneath Hester's boots. Pearl refused the rope. "Mr. Dobbins first." The driver could not move his leg. Hester braced beneath the broken bench and lifted until pain burned across her shoulders. "Pull him free!" Pearl dragged him clear. They splinted his leg and sent him up. Only Pearl remained. The wagon shifted. "Hester," Jonah called. Fear sharpened his voice, but did not rule it. "On my count. Both of you together." Hester fastened Pearl to the line and wrapped the loose end around her own wrist. "Now!" The pines below snapped as the wagon dropped. For 1 breath, Hester hung in open air. Then the rope caught. Jonah and Amos hauled while the ravine swallowed the wagon beneath them. Jonah seized Hester's coat at the edge and pulled her onto solid ground. "All 7?" she asked. "All 7?" Pearl knelt beside the children, gray with cold. Silas lied. "I heard him tell Mr. Dobbins the bridge had washed out. He wanted the main road clear for his freight team." Jonah looked toward Greyhaven, then back at Hester. The storm that had taken his brother had not taken them. He had not survived by commanding the world to be safe. He had survived by trusting someone beside him. Hester rose, still tied to the rope. "Get them home!" Together, they turned toward Cinder Ridge, carrying the living out of the white. Greyhaven gathered in the Cinder Ridge kitchen before the storm had passed. Pearl told the council what Silas had done. Mr. Dobbins confirmed it from the cot where Nell had splinted his leg. By noon, the town canceled Silas's contract, restored Jonah's credit, and ordered the spoiled feed replaced at his expense. Ezra arrived next day. "I cannot repair what I allowed," he told Hester, "but I will stop pretending silence was harmless." She accepted the truth without absolution. Pearl promised to learn the storebooks herself. Hester left the door open only as far as honest change could hold it. 6 weeks ended beneath a clear winter sky. Jonah placed the purse of return money between their cups. "You are free to go," he said. "I need you to know that before I ask you to stay. Why do you want me here? Not because the ranch runs better. I want the life we have begun. I want to listen when you speak, mend what I break, and keep choosing you, if you choose me too." Hester closed the purse. "I am not staying because I have nowhere else. I know. I am staying because I choose you." He came around the table. She met him halfway. By spring, the red blanket lay across a bench beneath the south window. The brass bell rang for another foal. Hester stood on the porch with coffee warming her hands. The road below was the same one that had carried her up as unwanted freight. Now it led outward in every direction. Jonah joined her and took her hand. Cinder Ridge had not made Hester smaller, prettier, or easier to keep. It had given her room to become fully visible. For the first time, home was not the place that needed her labor. It was the place where she was free, and still chose to remain.